What makes Dark Souls special? This is a question I've had difficulty explaining to people, especially those who haven't played the game. Maybe it's because I don't try to sell it as just a game I like. No, I regard it as one of the most important artistic works I've ever experienced. I consider my life better because I played Dark Souls. But, it's just a video game. It can't possibly reach the artistic depth of, say, the greatest pieces of literature or finest works of film, right? Well, I think it does. And not only that, but I think Dark Souls is one of the most ambitious art pieces of the last decade.
At least, it does more to push its medium than any art piece I've consumed in the past 10 years.
But I can't just tell you that and expect you to believe it. I have to prove it to you. And to do so, I have to tell you a story. The story of Lordran.
In the age of ancients.
The opening cutscene of Dark Souls firmly establishes the world the story will take place in. In an unchanging gray limbo, the everlasting dragons rule. The only dichotomy in this land is the above and the below, with arc trees stretching into the sky and a strange underground of deep crags. In this underground was born the first flame, a fire of unknown origin which created disparity in the world. The flame created heat, and thus the concept of cold was born as well. The flame birthed life, and thus death was conceived. And, of course, the light of the flame was met by the dark. And from this darkness came humanoid creatures who would become humans, giants, lords, and pygmies.
In this flame were 4 Lord Souls.
A soul of death claimed by Gravelord Nito, a soul of life claimed by the Witch of Izalith, and a light soul taken by Gwyn, Lord of Sunlight. Seath the Scaleless, a dragon born without the stone scales, which would grant him immortality like the other dragons, grew jealous of his kin and betrayed them, telling Gwyn of the lightning magic which they were weak to. The lords and their followers challenged the dragons and lost many of their own, but eventually they triumphed and thrust the world into a bountiful age of fire. But soon the flames will fade and only dark will remain. Thus begins your journey. You are an undead, a human who was one day branded with the accursed dark sign spreading throughout the world of man. This dark sign forces the undead to never die, to be revived at the bonfires which heal the undead and serve as their brief respite. However, when an undead continues to die, over and over again, they lose their sense of self, their motivation to carry on, and they go hollow. A hollow is an insane undead who can never return to a state of sanity and only exists to kill others for their souls.
But there exists a legend in these lands.
Thou who art undead art chosen, and thine exodus from the undead asylum maketh pilgrimage to the land of ancient lords. When thou ringeth the bell of awakening, the fate of the undead thou shalt know.
This saying, passed on to you by the dying Oscar who freed you from your cell, but now succumbs to the fate of hollowing, gives you your purpose. You go off to ring the 2 bells of awakening, one high above in the undead church,
And the other deep below in the poisonous Blight Town.
Through many hardships in your journey, finding the correct path to each location through trial and error, you eventually ring the 2 bells and return to Firelink Shrine. There, Kingseeker Frompt, friend of Gwyn, tells you your path. You are to head to Anor Londo, the grand city of Gwyn, and collect the Lord Vessel. With this Lord Vessel, you are to collect the souls of Nito, the Bed of Chaos, the 4 Kings, and Seath the Scaleless. Only then can you surpass the power of Gwyn to link the first flame. For there is a way to let the fire not fade. A way to avoid the endless dark. If one sacrifices themselves to the flame, after gaining immense strength, the fire can burn brighter once more, using their souls as fuel.
This is the most noble path one can take.
The same path Lord Gwyn took to ensure the world would never fade to darkness. A darkness which can be seen in New Londo, a land would succumb to the selfishness of man and was overtaken by the abyss, an endless dark which can lead any man to insanity. So, after surpassing even the lords, you as the chosen undead make your way to the first flame, where you come face to face with Gwyn. He is now a husk of the lord he once was, but he still remains strong. You lock blades and fight to the end. And once you succeed victorious, you link the first flame and save the world. Or so it would seem, but there's questions to ask here. For starters, the prophecy mentions one Bell of Awakening, not the two that you ring. And speaking of missing numbers, what happened to the fourth Lord Soul I mentioned? Seath and the four kings each had a fragment of Gwyn's Lord Soul, and the other two Lord Souls remained to the Witch of Izalith and Gravelord Nito. And anyway, why are you specifically chosen? Plenty of other undead escaped from the asylum and were just as worthy as you. Undead you meet along the way. And each of them are following the same quest. Well, there's another story to be told. One elucidated by another primordial serpent, just like Frompt. However, this one is opposite in beliefs. Darkstalker Koth. If you forsake Frompt and meet with Koth, he tells you the truth. The furtive pygmy, progenitor of man, was the one who claimed the fourth Lord Soul, the Dark Soul. And instead of fighting,
The pygmy waited to gain power?
through the darkness of the world. Over time, it increased the power of its Dark Soul, and eventually, the same power spread to all of humankind. The humanity items in the game are fragments of the Dark Soul. They are the Dark Souls, showing the power of man is linked to the furtive pygmy and their Lord Soul. But Gwyn feared this power that directly rivaled his light. Thus, he created civilizations to keep the humans away, and created the Way of White Church to manipulate the humans into corralling undead as the curse began to spread. But this curse began with Gwyn. His decision to link the first flame and try to counteract the natural course of the world led to the spread of the abyss and eternal darkness, as well as the undead curse, which spread through humanity. It was a natural reaction of the world responding to Gwyn's unnatural decision and actions. Gwyn is what caused all of the terrible hardships you and the rest of mankind face, and it seems only right to resist his philosophy and follow Koth. He will raise you up as a powerful Lord of Dark, after all, and you may find true strength
In your true darkness.
Or so it would seem, but both of the stories of Frompt and Koth lead you to believe you're special in some way, set apart from the other undead, that you have something that makes you super important to them, and that your decision in the end will greatly affect the course of the world. But truthfully, it won't. Soon, the flames will fade, and only dark will remain. This is a fact of the world, and even if you link the flame or leave it be, the world will eventually turn to dark. Now, it may seem like we're going in circles, like we're stuck in a cycle of endless questions. It may even seem pointless, like your character's existence doesn't matter. It makes you wonder, what's the point? But all of that is looking at Dark Souls as just a story. This isn't the case. Dark Souls is a video game, and understanding that is important to understanding what makes Dark Souls stand out as a masterpiece. Let's get into it. Respawning. It's one of the most common game mechanics and is often taken for granted. Games are games after all, so of course you would come back after dying. How else would you be able to play the game again?
But with the recent push for greater narratives in video games,
The concept of death seems to be inexplicable in most stories. Many games will send you back to a previous save or respawn you so you can play again right away. However, Dark Souls does something incredible. The concept of death and respawning is actively a part of your character's existence. It's the undead curse. The undead curse makes you immortal, but causes you to lose your sanity every time you die and to only revive at a bonfire again. What I'm trying to say here is, there's a story explanation
to respawning and checkpoints.
And once you realize this, that what would usually be considered given game mechanics as a vessel for the story to travel upon
are instead turned into story elements in Dark Souls,
then you automatically grow a deeper connection to your character and the world around you. Checkpoints are bonfires, beacons of reprieve for the undead across the land,
and points of rest for you as a player,
as they are some of the only few safe places in this difficult world. The bonfires are fires linked to the original First Flame, placed there by Gwyn's children and their followers to guide the undead towards their forced destiny to link the First Flame. The fire of the flame heals the dark soul of the undead, their humanity, and even fills their flasks with healing liquid of the flame. In return, the undead can use their humanity to kindle the flame and make it even more powerful. In this regard, the bonfires truly are microcosms of the First Flame, mirroring how the dark souls of the undead can and will be used as fuel to meet the expectations of the gods. There's even more to this, but we'll get into that later. Remember how this section was supposed to be about gameplay? Let's get back to that. Dark Souls is insanely difficult. If you've heard anything about this game, it's likely this sentiment. However, if you take a dive into the game, you'll learn that that's not exactly the case. Dark Souls is unforgiving. If you make a mistake, you're punished accordingly by your enemies. But why is this really important? Dark Souls has become one of the most influential games of this decade.
while its spiritual predecessor, Demon Souls,
is responsible for a lot of the innovations attributed to Dark Souls. It was Dark Souls which popularized these ideas. These games spawned a new genre in their own right, and have created countless discussions about modern games as well. Particularly, it has reminded people of the importance of difficulty in video games.
However, as we've gone over, this isn't the full extent of the prowess of From Software's design.
Let's think about it. The game is hard. Thus, this implies the world is hard for your character to live in,
Which explains the prepare to die subtitle of the game.
and the lingering "you died" screen every time you die. Your character is bound to die, a lot. And what happens when an undead dies too many times? They go hollow. But no matter how many times you die, your character never fully goes hollow. Why is that? Well, the truth is, they can go hollow. But it isn't an in-game mechanic. It's a real-life decision the player can make. To give up. If you put down the controller and close the game for the last time, never to play that character again, they've gone hollow. Do you realize how insane this is? Hidetaka Miyazaki and the Dark Souls team not only explain their game mechanics in their world, but even the out-of-game decisions of the player to get frustrated, give up, and quit playing. The level of detail at this point is mind-boggling and has not been done by almost any other game. This is why Dark Souls is a video game. If it wasn't interactive, if it was a movie, a book, a TV show, it wouldn't work. The interactivity of Dark Souls is molded into the very structure of the piece and can never be removed without distracting from the experience as a whole.
This is why I play video games.
For this extra level of depth, developers can make using interactivity. But now that we've established the connection between the player and their character, what fate did this create for them? Even if you beat the game, your character is found at the Undead Asylum to begin New Game Plus. This too is a metaphor for the game itself. The natural cycle of the world is to repeat itself. The levels of the game loop into each other to emulate this idea of cycles and repeating ideas, and the New Game Plus cycle is the same. And you're stuck in this endless cycle of life and death, forced to live and die again, but to never go hollow. With such a tumultuous and difficult life, you have to ask,
What's the point? Perhaps our answer can be found
in the journey. Let's take a look at the environments of Dark Souls.
a broken church inhabited by only hollows.
A forgotten, overgrown garden, an infested sewer of grotesque creatures, followed by increasingly more grotesque creatures in a disgusting swamp. The demon-infested ruins of the Witch of Izalith's forgotten capital. I describe all this to you to tell you that the world of Dark Souls is not an ideal one to live in. You would live always on the brink of death, and this world is full of dangers and creatures threatening your sanity thanks to a cycle of rebirth that only leads to insanity. But despite all of this,
The world of Lordran is beautiful.
you could chalk it up to the ingenious enemy placement across the whole game, making each encounter in the areas they take place in so much more memorable. But even just taking a look at, say, the giant crack in the huge room in the middle of the sewers that make up the depths, and realize it's magical,
Even the poisonous swamp that is Blighttown.
which is considered incredibly annoying to play through by many, is one of my favorite areas. The way it's built around this grand arch tree that stretches so far below and reaches so high is awe-inspiring. The way the rickety structures are so chaotic, yet still makes sense to navigate, really creates intrigue into the experiences that led the beings of Blighttown to their lifestyle. The way you keep descending towards the swamp over time, and how the gameplay transforms into a completely new level once you reach it. God, I love this area. Sure, dying here is a hassle, but the great detail of this world makes it all worthwhile. And surely this doesn't apply to just a handful of areas.
Each area has incredible detail that makes it fascinating to explore every time, as you can pick up on connections you didn't make previously.
But these visuals, while great, are only half of the aesthetic value. The other half is found in the sound design. Take a look, or rather, a listen to any other action RPG and notice how integral music is to the action. This isn't a bad thing. Music can add a ton of extra emotion and meaning behind the gameplay. However, Dark Souls doesn't need music to make every encounter memorable, as the challenge through such simple to understand combat mechanics already hold great weight. As such, Dark Souls is largely devoid of a constant soundtrack. Instead, its soundscape is largely dominated by the clunking jingle of your armor, the sounds of heavy footsteps, the slashing of metal into flesh, all giving emphasis to your actions across this journey. This really focuses your concentration onto the combat itself, giving the already great combat system all the more prominence and memorability. But this also adds a bit of loneliness to your journey, making the parts of the game that do contain music all the more memorable. There are 4 areas with soundtracks, which are all important to your journey. The music at Firelink Shrine, at first, comes across as somber and forlorn, at least to me, especially compared to other hub areas in other games. However, as I kept finding myself returning to this area throughout the interconnected world, the sound of the strings coming in as I approached the bonfire managed to make Firelink Shrine feel like a home. This is where you and many other characters you meet along the way will convene. And although many of them will leave to horrible fates later on, it's getting to know them at this comforting spot that's important. Guinevere's Chamber is the area in which you receive the Lord Vessel, and this ritual is made out to be grandiose, to fit in with Gwyn's false prophecy of the undead. Thus, the soundtrack takes on an ironic twist when you realize the truth. The Chaos Sister bonfire is hidden behind an illusory wall to protect Quelaag's sister. Cursed to take on a demonic form due to the actions of her mother, the Witch of Izalith, she takes on the heavier burden of healing creatures with parasitic egg sacs taking over their bodies.
Quelaag has taken up her position as a boss of Blighttown to kill any undead who hopes to ring the bell.
Instead, she wants to steal their humanity to heal her sister from the strength she's lost trying to heal these creatures. Realizing this after you've slain Quelaag can make you easily feel awful, and the sorrowful soundtrack which accompanies this area may prompt you to take up the position of a chaos servant, invading the worlds of other undead and taking their humanity to heal Quelaag's sister. Finally is Ash Lake. Ash Lake is one of my favorite areas in the game
For 2 reasons.
1, it is largely devoid of any great gameplay purpose other than a specific covenant, and 2, the path to it is incredibly obscure. It's situated behind 2 illusory walls in the Archtree of Blighttown, the Great Hollow. So finding it on your own is a treat. Then, the path down the tree takes you past countless tough enemies looking to instantly kill you with a curse. But if you make it past all of that, Ash Lake is a beautiful, thought-provoking, massive black lake situated below the entire world. Its arch trees seem to hold up the world,
And one such tree houses
an everlasting dragon. Thought to be extinct, one of them has survived, and you can take up service to this dragon if you so desire, invading other worlds to become more like a dragon. And all of this was hidden. You could put thousands of hours into this game and never find it. It would still be incredible if it was, say, in the main story path, but the fact that so much thought was put into something that players may never find
shows the dedication put into the craft of Dark Souls.
Each of these areas are given a beautiful score to emphasize their importance. On the other hand, general areas with a lot of combat contain no music to emphasize the sounds of battle. However, there are parts of the game which both use music to emphasize importance and contain great combat. They are the boss battles. The boss battles of Dark Souls are a treat to behold. They stand as hallmarks on your journey across Lordran to test your skill and prove your worth. The early bosses will test your basic skills and serve as some large difficulty bumps until the game clicks and you understand the to and fro of combat. All the while, highly dramatic orchestration and choirs fill your ears with anxiety, power, fear, awe, vigor, desire, and much, much more as you defeat these great threats. The emotion the soundtrack adds to each of these fights keeps building as you fight more bosses, becoming more unique and always catered to the design, backstory, and combat of each boss. The Gaping Dragon, for example, has massive drums echoing in the background,
With high-pitched violins and vocals,
fading in and out of the lead position to sell the giant and threatening nature of this boss. Ornstein and Smell are given mystical harps,
epic horns,
booming drums, looming violins, an organ section, and, of course, deep, echoing chorus, which all mash together beautifully to emphasize the grand scale of this boss fight, both physically and lore-wise. The piece fades from intense and in-your-face to settled yet still dramatic. These are the Guardians of Anor Londo and the Lord Vessel, and serve as the last mounting threat before the game shifts into its second half, and their theme emphasizes that perfectly.
and as we build up to even more intense boss themes throughout the game's progression,
It all coalesces in the final boss theme. Gwyn, Lord of Cinder. If you remember the story of Gwyn,
he was the Grand Lord of Sunlight who lost it all trying to maintain his fire.
if you listen to Koth's story, he is the antagonist. He is the one who caused suffering for all mankind with the undead curse and still hurts them with his false prophecy. All because of his own ideals. All because he wanted to hold on to his power. All because he was scared. And surely he wasn't the only one. Everyone's afraid of the dark. Sure, maybe not of the actual dark itself, but it's a common fear because the most common fear in the world is the fear of the unknown. And what was the greatest unknown the world of Lordran had ever faced? What would happen if the world faded to dark?
Gwyn perpetrated many terrible acts in his quest to save the world he created.
But it's hard to blame him for trying to do so if you put yourself in his position.
And the one who paints him as the blatant antagonist
Is the known liar, Darkstalker Koth, while his foil, Frompt, praises Gwyn as a grand protagonist. Truthfully, he's neither. But hold on, if our perceived antagonist is not inherently evil, then what about our hero? What about us, the player? On your journey, you're constantly striving towards an answer to your questions and looking for a purpose in this life. Along the way, you kill Quelaag, who was only looking for a way to help her sister, Sif, who tried to stop anyone from the same terrible fate as his master in the Abyss,
Pinwheel, who only looked to bring his family back.
Seath, who achieved the immortality which he lacked at birth, and you kill many more creatures than that. By all intents and purposes, it would be easy to paint yourself as the bad guy. But this is where the beauty of Dark Souls' narrative comes to light. Recall the opening cutscene we talked about. Plenty of detail and exposition, sure, but many questions still remained. But the game doesn't answer these questions in any other cutscene. In fact, the other cutscenes might just lead to more questions. No, the story of Dark Souls is told through lore, item descriptions, character dialogue, cutscenes, and player speculation. These are the major factors to the Dark Souls story. The story of Dark Souls is obscured, even with all of the details you were given. We've established there's obviously an effort put into the design of this world with meticulous detail all around, but much of it is left to your own interpretation. A perfect example of this is my favorite video game character of all time, Solaire of Astora. Solaire is a warrior of sunlight, an in-game covenant which the player can join. This covenant revolves around being summoned to the world of another player and aiding them in their journey. This is not Solaire's main goal, however. No, instead he's in search for his own son. No, not his child, but rather the giant body of light in the sky, which he refers to as a grossly incandescent father. Solaire knows that his obsession with the sun is strange, but nevertheless, he strives for it, and for the immediate satisfaction he may feel when he achieves it. As he goes along his journey, though, he grows increasingly less optimistic and more anxious, realizing that he might never find the sun he was looking for. In the end, he finds a parasitic bug shaped like the sun, which creates a bright glow. In his confusion, he believes the creature for his end goal, his son,
and is overtaken by it.
Or, if you kill the creature before it can overtake your companion, you can summon him in the battle against Lord Gwyn.
Though both of these endings contain little dialogue or explanation,
I always felt saving Solaire was one of the greatest things you could do in this game. Many of the character quest lines result in hollowing. Those you attempted to help actually lose their purpose because of your actions. Even then, you move on, not disheartened by their poor fate. You realize that you might fail when trying to do the right thing, and the only thing you can do is move on and learn. Because eventually, you might be able to help someone else. You might be able to show someone their true goal. Not some glorious treasure, but the joy of aiding others in their task. Indeed, Solaire's son was right in front of him the entire time, helping others as a warrior of sunlight. So let's go back to our main story and take a good thought on our primordial serpents, Frompt and Koth. It's unclear how much they both truly know, or what powers they possess.
So whose story is the truth?
Well, I'd say both mislead you with skewed stories that contain an inkling of reality in them. Frompt is correct in surmising that the flames are fading, but considering his stationary position at Firelink Shrine, he knows much less of the horrors caused by trying to stop that fade. The demons, the abyss, the undead curse. It all occurred because of the failed attempts to keep the fire going. Then, maybe embracing the darkness is the right choice. However, after journeying through 2 civilizations ruined by the abyss, it's surely not a desirable conclusion. So it's clear that these primordial serpents are simply misleading you to obtain their unknowable goals.
But does this make them evil?
As we discussed, you explore the world in your own search for knowledge and purpose, and harm the lives of others on the way.
Who's to say you're in the right just because these creatures may be in the wrong?
I'd say no one, because everyone here is acting out of selfish desire. There's no solid good or evil in this world. You, Gwyn, Solaire, Koth, Frompt. We all just want to survive
with what power we still have.
But I ask once more, in a harsh world of unclear good or evil, where everyone acts of their own selfishness, leading only to death and insanity, what's the point? I believe that all of this can be summed up in my favorite item in Dark Souls. Through all of the countless items with descriptions painting a web of mystery and intrigue that serves as a backbone for the game, with countless weapons and armor pieces with insanely detailed design, with so many useful consumables and other items, my favorite is the pendant. If you've played Dark Souls, then you know you can pick one starting item from a list at the beginning. These items are called burial gifts, implying your fate is an undead left to die, yet not being able to. The Master Key is one such item, and is incredibly useful for getting to other areas early in the game. Black Firebombs can net you a unique weapon, and Twin Humanities are always useful. And the Pendant? It's useless. There's no hidden use for this item, no mechanic that'll make it valuable by any means. Players have scoured far and wide ever since the game came out, especially after director Hidetaka Miyazaki recommended picking either the Pendant or nothing at all for their burial gift. Why would he do so? Perhaps he was just messing with people, or maybe he was forced to put in the other items since the game was considered so hard. But he still recommends not using the burial gifts as a means to increase the challenge and make the experience more organic. However, I believe there's another reason. Look at your character. Left for dead, but can't even do that. Told to link the flame, but likely to refuse it. By all measures, you can't fulfill any purpose given to you. You're useless. Just like the Pendant. And finally, with all of that, we can answer the question. What is the point? Well, my friends, there isn't one. There's no true reason for your journey, other than following the false path laid out for you by some greater powers in this world. You might learn countless things along your adventure, but none of it matters. No choice you make will truly have any significant impact on the world. All of your friends will likely go hollow along the way. And you're useless. You may as well go hollow. But you don't. Because something keeps you going. It may be the beauty of the world and its gorgeous environments. Perhaps it's the soft sounds of the universe accompanying your journey. Maybe it's the friends and memories you make along the way. Or maybe it's finally triumphing over what seemed like a completely insurmountable challenge in a certain boss fight. Whatever it is that keeps you here, you can be grateful for it.
Because that's the point.
It's meaning you put into everything that makes it all worthwhile.
It's the Pendant,
A trinket that may seem useless to others, but has specific meaning to you. Something that may warm your heart, despite being functionally pointless. Dark Souls is a metaphor for life. There's no inherent reason we're born, only to die. And through countless hardships, we're left struggling and asking, what's the point? And the universe responds with indifference. People act selfishly just to live in this harsh reality of unchanging difficulty. But it's what's in this universe that makes it special. The stories, the history, the beauty of nature, and the potential of those who inhabit it, despite knowing its indifference to them. It's that spirit that keeps you fighting. That is the point of life. That is the art of Dark Souls.